And what we're going to be talking about in this panel, we're going to be looking at the point. So we kind of, in the last panel, we dropped off at Engage. Engage was the last point, and people had their Java games and they were succeeding, but it was a tough economy, and it was a bit of a dog-eat-dog world, and trying to get your game to succeed when the operators and the handset manufacturers controlled distribution was tough. And I think that's fair to say. But the smartphone arrived, the iPhone arrived, the App Store arrived, and that washed away that whole system and opened it up. And joining me today are 5 guests who've managed to really sort of succeed within that context. And so could we just run down the line quickly and just get everyone to quickly introduce themselves, and then we'll jump into understanding how exactly we managed to succeed in this wonderful smartphone era. So,
I'm Joni with Mountain Sheep. I co-founded it with brothers Kimmo and Timo Vihola after I had done my exit from what ended up being NVIDIA Finland, formerly Hybrid Graphics. And we've been doing games for the iOS after our first mishaps with the PSP platform. Turned out that the iOS was a better bet.
Okay, I'm Jaakko Kylmäjä, the Vice President Publishing from Fingersoft. The Fingersoft started about 2012 with some camera applications, which had a cross-promotion systems to each application have more installs than the previous one. And in the end of 2012, we made the first game called Hill Climb Racing that got very quickly to the top of the lists. And that game we are also using nowadays as a publishing tool because we have more than 180 million downloads and 8 million daily active users.
Yeah, hi guys, I'm Teemu Mäkipatola. I'm working on the business and marketing side of Frogmind. And I started basically in console gaming in 2005. I was previously doing like motion games with a camera interface and later on Kinect, which was kind of like the console equivalent of trying to grab like the bigger audience from hardcore to expanding to the bigger casual audience, which is what mobile and tablets have now achieved.
Cool.
Good evening, my name is Atte Ilvesö. I'm executive producer and one of the founders of Red Links. And during the last 15 years I have been producing over 40 games for web, for PC, for game consoles and mobile phones. And today I'm here to tell you more about the early iPhone games of Red Links.
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Joni, I'm the CEO of Secret Exit. I think we're trying to claim the title of being the oldest independent Finnish iPhone publisher / developer with an orange in the logo, unless the other thing doesn't hold true. So yeah, we kind of rose from the ashes of the old mobile stuff. I mean, we were trying to do C++ 3D mobile games before it was feasible or even sane to do those, which obviously failed. And then in 2006, Secret Exit was founded, and we've been here ever since. We're independent, owned by the employees. We self-publish our titles and own our own IP, and we've managed to survive this far.
Oh, fantastic. And I think I'm going to start things off by talking about the moment that the iPhone arrived, the moment that the iPhone came along, and particularly, I think perhaps more important than the iPhone, even the App Store. I mean, how transformative was the arrival of this distribution platform that you could essentially, it would help you get your game across the world, it would put you on a single platform where people were really happy, to come and download your games, and it would give you access to all of these things like reporting and billing, and all you had to do was give away a third of your profits. I mean, I'm sure many of you must have been working in mobile before. I mean, how about you, Ati? I mean, what was your experience? Did you love that moment when the App Store came in? Were you celebrating, running through the streets, wildly celebrating?
Yeah, I remember the moment. But actually, for me, the most important point was when I picked up the iPhone first time to my hands and I slide the images on it. And it was something truly new thing, remarkable. I mean, you all kind of remember your moment when you picked up the iPhone and you started flicking the images. And it was like we all were transferred from the past to the future in one day.
Yeah,
wasn't it?
I mean, exactly. I can remember playing a backbreaker, one of the American football games, for the first time on one of my friend's phone, and being staggered because I'd gone from a rubbish rally game on one of my Nokia phones to playing this full American football dodging style game. I mean, what was your moment? I guess Tammy, what was your moment when you realised that the iPhone was this spectacular new platform?
Well, going like a little bit before that, I mean, working on console games was the choice made because I wanted to work on some interesting games, and back then the mobile games were not very sexy. They looked like crap, like 10 years backwards in gaming. But I guess that's kind of what changed with, at least, well, I wasn't paying that much focus on mobile then, but I think that was like one of the things that changed with iPhone, that it was like enough cool, enough magical and allowed to do actually like a little, well, quite a bit better gaming. And since then, I think Apple has been driving also the hardware forwards, because now we see it like a convergence of games, same games on console and PC and mobile, and it's not about mobile and console or mobile and PC games anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
As different ones.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting as well, because everyone has that moment in their mind when they played the iPhone. Well, they played a game on the iPhone for the first time, and it kind of goes, wow, this is something completely new and spectacular. But at the same time, Apple initially didn't let you actually put games onto the iPhone. It took another number of months before the App Store came around and they introduced that before you could actually get your game out. And so, I mean, Uni, what was your experience with this? I mean, when you first used the iPhone, were you dying to make games for it? Were you really sitting there?
We did enjoy it, but being in Finland, we even got the phones quite late. So we were enthusiastic and excited about this new device before we actually could get our hands on it. But we had been promised by Nokia and others putting money into the mobile games that is going to be like $1 billion market next year. And when you get the iPhone, then you finally realize that okay, it's going to be $1 billion market. That it's actually going to happen, and that was exciting. And for us, we made a PSP game and it sold 20,000 units in the year on its market. And we made an iOS game with whatever money we had left, and it sold 20,000 units in this first weekend. So we saw this was going to be really, really big.
Yeah, so you managed to see that there was this market developing. I guess that's a question there for you, Yanni. When did you realise that this was such a big deal? What was the moment for you when your company perhaps released your first game or something along those lines where you realised that there was this huge success to be had?
Well, we kind of realized that the iPhone was the platform of choice when developing for a console would have bankrupted us.
Yeah.
So the fact that Apple was reporting every month and the cash flow was coming in every month, that was a big change from the consoles. Just that on the business level was so key and so important for a small company, because it's not the budget that really kills us, it's the cash flow. So to be able to publish a game, get money in every month, pay the wages, and keep going. The hardware was nice, but we had been working on Gizmodo, so 3D mobile devices were not a huge big deal for us. We had been expecting them and waiting for them, and sure, yes, iPhone was beautiful when it came out. But yeah, it was not the hardware, it was actually the business and the reporting and the back end of iTunes, which put it really a generation ahead of anything else. Step ahead of Sony and Microsoft and Nintendo in all of that, how money was actually delivered back to developers.
Exactly. That's something that I spoke to another developer a while back, a British developer, talking to me about billing from operators, where they'd have to basically pester the operators to get their money, in which they'd have to constantly chase them up, whereas with the App Store, obviously it's automated, and so it just comes in nicely every month, which is fantastic in comparison to chasing things up. But so we've got this mind-blowing gameplay experience, we've got the fantastic architecture around it, which allowed it to make it a much easier business environment to flourish in. But I guess I'm going to go to you sort of as one last little point, I guess, Jaakko, about this. When you were developing for it, how much easier was it to develop, say, for just the iPhone versus having to deal with all of these fragmentation of all of these devices that you potentially had to deal with prior to that? Did it help solve the issue of platform fragmentation, for example?
Well, actually, we did start developing for iPhone really late, because we were more thinking about that we wanted to make good, true games, and we thought that those games are like console games and PC games and stuff. But I think in 2012 we started thinking that, okay, now there can be good games also for iPhones. But we actually started with Android devices, and iPhone was like we just wanted to port the builds of our camera applications and hill climb racing to the iPhone market because we had so much installs on Android already. So basically it was kind of also hill climb racing, it was more like a test of in-app purchases, that how do they work, and eventually it appeared to be a very good result.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point, because again, in terms of the history of the store, I mean, 2007 the iPhone's released, 2008 the App Store arrives. It's 2009 when in-app purchases arrive, and that's kind of when the dimension of the store changes, when the dimension of the economy starts going away from, say, solely these paid games towards this opportunity for freemium games. I mean, you start to see the advantages of it. I mean, how important was the arrival of the in-app purchase in turning the mobile ecosystem from, say, this thing that could potentially succeed, that could potentially be a massive hit, to being something that actually was a massive hit and was a multi-billion-dollar industry?
Yeah, it was hugely important because obviously it opened up all the kind of, otherwise we would have just premium games and maybe some advertisements inside the games, but this how, for example, hill climb racing in the first year, it was about 60% of all revenue came from in-app purchases. So it allowed us to make a free-to-play model of games that made us to access hundreds of millions of players, actually. As I said, like 180 millions for hill climb racing. It never could have happened if it would be just a premium game.
Yeah. So it's this mass market adoption of smartphones combined with the freemium model that really helped you to succeed. But at the same time as you were succeeding with free-to-play, and probably actually arguably prior to that, there were a number of companies and a number of developers who managed to succeed by releasing those freemium games. That it's the first Angry Birds, it's Doodle Jump, these kind of titles that really helped to spark off this interest. I mean, how important, I guess, I use the term democratic when I think about the App Store, because in comparison to the operator system, it was kind of top-down and you had to be in the right circles, the right little cliques to benefit from it. Whereas the App Store, you were able to succeed by being a smaller company. I mean, how important do you feel that was in sparking this real interest in the App Store ecosystem and helping it to grow to where it was? I guess you guys have got some probably interesting perspectives on it. I mean, there we go.
Yeah, I think the most important things in App Store in the early days was the ability to anybody to publish the game, and at the same time possibility for anybody to be on a features list. So those two things together were important.
Yeah.
So they gave the feeling for that anybody could publish the game, get the millions of downloads for the games.
Yeah.
So that was important.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know, I'm clearly conflicted about the rise of the free-to-play gaming and what it has done and how it affects all of the studios altogether. I mean, for us, it was a very good time in the days of yore to make a good paid game and reach tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of paying customers with that. With Apple curating, it was a very simple way, and it allowed developers to do what they actually do best. Then, with the rapid changes of the App Store, it's definitely been a challenge from releasing $5 games to $1 games, to $1 games with in-app purchases, to free downloads with in-app purchases, and then this latest model, free game with consumables.
Yeah.
And for a small studio like we are, it has been a wild ride, and to be honest, we failed in the end. I mean, we're not capable of making good games that would be funded by consumables.
Interesting.
So, and even if we were, we would not be able to maintain independence and get VC funding to buy downloads. So ultimately, the current situation in the mobile market is such that it's almost shutting us out.
That's a really interesting perspective that you've got there as well. I mean, I'm pretty honest as well. You know, not many people I think would come up and say that, and I really admire the fact that you did, because that's real honesty. And I guess this pulls me over to Teemu and Frogmind, because Frogmind obviously succeeded with Badland as a paid game, but from what I read, Badland had received 700,000 installs prior to being featured by Apple, and then in the course of a single week in an App Store feature for the 5th birthday of the App Store, when it went free, your downloads weren't at 700,000, they were sort of 7 million or something along those lines. I mean, how does the App Store dynamic make you think about Frogmind's future in terms of paid versus free to play? I mean, what kind of thinking does that end up sparking, I guess, for you guys?
So when the game was launched, it was featured by Apple, and that was like the key for a paid game to really make a good beginning. And it was then later when it was turned for that App Store 5-year celebration, free for 1 week, that made 7.5 million downloads. But yeah, I mean, free to play is exactly about kind of reaching a huge market and then like trying to monetize that market. And on the Android side, we went the free to play road. Well, kind of free to play. I mean, the game was paid by design, so we didn't like try to make it really free to play, but just like unlocking the content of the premium game.
Yeah.
And I think on the Android side, because if you looked at the statistics, then it was pretty clear that the paid game market on Android was almost non-existent. So we thought that we'd rather have let's say a few million downloads and no income from Android than 5,000 downloads on a paid game.
Yeah.
And I think it was the right decision to do. We have now like 8 million downloads on the Android side, and it's actually, because the volume is big, it has brought in considerable revenue as well.
Yeah, no, that's it's a difficult conversation actually always to have this free to play versus paid. But one of the things that I've noticed, particularly about Finnish companies, I think they're willing to adapt. And I've found that when I've spoken to developers, they're quite often, I mean, I think in terms of like your honesty, for example, about, you know, you were saying we can make great premium games with free to play, not necessarily. I think there's a sort of a refreshing honesty about the way that Finnish developers often approach the task of making these games successful. But maybe that's, I mean, the question that I'm sort of building up to, and I'm wondering whether or not I'm, you know, relying on a stereotype or if this is just my thoughts, but I was wondering, what do you think are the sort of characteristics about the Finnish community in general that led to so many developers in the country succeeding on mobile? Was it basically the fact that they had been invested in for a long time, or was it a case that there's this innate talent within the Finnish industry that really helps them succeed? I guess, would you like to take a stab at that?
Well, I hear it quoted often that the kind of background, I mean, taking things 20 years, 25 years back, from even to the days of Commodore 64, and the adoption within this, within families at that time, and for people to grow up on computers, for there to be the assembly, demo competitions. So there was this whole community of people who had grown up on computers and enjoyed kind of hacking and making visual things that competed in performance. So that definitely is a strong factor in well, I mean, if you look at the demo scene, then those people who were big there are now in the management of Future Mark Remedy and so forth. So that's a huge part of it. Then I'd say that the industry that was around Nokia, not so much perhaps, I mean, pardon me for the people who worked at Nokia, I've never done that, but at least for the subcontractors who were around the mobile industry, that certainly sparked some experience also to the whole thing. Not in terms of success, obviously, but in terms of good experience.
No, I mean, would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I do agree, but also it's like mentioned in the previous panels, it's the weather. In the winter, hard winter. We can work hard when it's winter.
Yeah.
And you know, we have this feeling that we can work harder, and Finnish people don't go down so easily. So if we go down, we jump up, and it's called sisu in Finland.
Yeah, well, at the same time, I think you're being remarkably modest, because the weather's terrible in England, and there's not that many good mobile developers around. We just do, obviously, much less productive things with our time when it's raining outside. I don't know what that is, but you know, I think I'm just sort of passing this one down because I'm interested to see sort of your different opinions. I mean, what about you, Jaakko? What do you think about this? Was there some sort of kernel that made Finland so successful for these mobile games, or?
Well, I think it was back in the 80s when we had like most Commodore 64 computers per capita in the world, and those little children, as myself, started learning programming with Commodore Basic, and then we had this demo scene, as you said, and I think the basic culture, in addition to this all demo scene, and that we had lots of computers, and especially that we had these high tax rates in Finland that we had, that actually those families that didn't have any money still, or didn't have any job, still had money to buy like the computers for their children. I know many people that, for example, in our company, that in any other country wouldn't be ever able to access actually computers. So this kind of culture that we had on the tax rates, but also like nowadays that we're so open-minded, we have this term like Finnish NDA, that we kind of share things open-mindedly, but still take care that we don't talk about each other's secrets if we are not allowed to. So we don't have to put any written down signatures when we talk with our friends in our office, in our sauna.
So it's a sort of an honour code.
Yeah,
You've got your kind of gang code, like
Yeah,
the gangs of Finland. But I don't know. But I guess I'm going to sort of round off with one last question. I think about the nature of influences, and extending beyond this, obviously, Rovio and Supercell. I think it would be fair to say that they've been colossal successes, and I think they've inspired people all around the world to think about making mobile games, not just Finnish people. But I was wondering, what kind of an impact did those successes have when you were thinking about going into mobile? I mean, obviously some of them would have been working concurrently at the same time, but Tammy, did they help you push on? Did they help you sit there and think, God, I can be a success on mobile, and really encourage you to do that? Was that fair to say?
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at the industry, it seems like Supercell pretty much single-handedly kind of turned the tide of the VC community to be like back towards mobile gaming, which they were a little bit like almost leaving already because of Zyngas, etc., and well, gaming in general. But and this has brought pretty many investments during the last few years to other mobile
well, that's handy.
gaming companies in Finland.
Exactly, it brings the success brings people in who are willing to put a bit of money behind it, put the money where their mouth is, I guess.
But if you look at Rovio as well, I mean, they are educating and teaching, giving gaming skills to 900 people at the moment, and you can pretty much expect more companies to spawn from those people, and I mean it's getting lots of inertia.
I think so. I think it's a really intriguing culture. I think it's something that we're going to tackle a bit more in the next panel, but just about the way that the Finnish culture seems to, the development culture encourages cooperation. It encourages you guys to work together. I mean,
it's we recognize that 99% of the products will be sold outside of the country. So the people next to us, they are not in that sense our competition. They are not going to take the market away from us, and there's more than 1 million applications out there, so why would we fight with each other when we can take over the world together?
Take over the world together. Well, on that ominous note, with the Finnish game developers attempting to take over the world, can everyone give our panelists a round of applause, because they've been absolutely fantastic.